And we're live, everyone. Week 7, Sunday morning. Sigmund Bloom here. Dr. Jene Bramel on assignment. Jason Wood feeling it after the Eagles and Carson Wentz.
Elevation.
Yeah, well, hey, take your victories where you can get them, and you certainly get a lot of victories if you follow DFS Donuts, Mitch Carl, and you use Rise or Fall. You're going to Rise for your DFS plays. Let's jump right in. And Mitch, it's getting to that time of year. The next week is Halloween. Weather's getting cooler. Wouldn't know that in New Orleans with another tropical system for us to watch. But first, let's talk because DFS, Vegas, it's all connected. It's all interconnected. I believe the over/under on Denver, Kansas City has dropped 5 points. Yeah. So when we're looking ahead to the afternoon slate, or we're setting our Millie Maker lineups, things like that, should we heed that as a sign to stay away from this game?
That's I often try not to put too much stock into small line movements, but a 5-point line movement, that is significant. And, we're looking at, I'm not a weatherman, just things I've read across the internet today. 3 to 5 inches. It's going to be cold, 3 to 5 inches of snow. And that does take me off the game to some extent. And on top of that, I already wasn't kind of on that game. I think the players in that game are in tough spots, weird spot. They're some of them are priced up. We don't know what we're going to get from Drew Lock. Melvin Gordon has returned. Is he going to have a split backfield at all? There's just a lot of questions there for me. There's not a lot of targets outside of the main two with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. You can try to lean on someone like McCole Hardman, but you saw him go out there as a starter last week and get one pass target. So I wasn't on that game in particular to start. And there's so many other juicy spots today. I believe there's 9 other teams with implied team totals over 27 points. There's going to be offense everywhere today. And if we have a spot where I think that it's going to be incredibly volatile, on top of a situation that I already felt like it was hard to read, I'm just not there.
Yeah, I think that it certainly takes Patrick Mahomes. I'm about to move him down in my rankings a little bit. I mean, within the top 5. But if you want that high-priced quarterback, then Mahomes is probably not the answer. We have a lot of let's go and then Woodrow. I want you to weigh in on this because we have a lot of backfields in motion this week. We're going to wait to hear on Aaron Jones. I echoed the good doctor's thoughts. And by the way, Football Guy subscribers, you get his Sunday morning update for everything you need to know. We've got Green Bay, Cincinnati, San Francisco. It looks like Jeff Wilson's going to play today, much to dismay if you got Jerick McKinnon or Michael Hasty. And the Chargers aren't necessarily in motion, Mitch, but we saw Justin Jackson expected to play, but on the injury report, not known for his durability. So out of the Green Bay, Cincinnati, San Francisco, and Chargers backfields, Mitch, who is your favorite pick at price to put in your DFS lineups today?
Yeah, that was a great way to phrase it. There's a lot of opportunity around the league today for backup running backs potentially. And Justin Jackson, I really like in certain spots. I think that you can use him specifically in like a run back stack. What that means is you could have Gardner Minshew with 1 or 2 of his wide receivers and hope that, he has himself a good game, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. A couple of those touchdowns go to his wide receivers you have stacked. And then on the other side, you're running Justin Jackson in here, who will be the primary passing down back if active today. And you get a chance to soak up hopefully 6 to 7 catches, racks up some yardage out of the backfield, some garbage time points, things like that. If you're not going with that type of scenario, though, I think you're plugging in Jamal Williams. I think he is first and foremost good chalk. And, he's a talented running back. We've seen in these types of spots before go out there, get 15, 18 touches, and he can produce. He's decent in the red zone. He's got good hands out of the backfield. It's a very high implied team total of 30 points. The implied team line has not shifted at all with any news going, in either direction for Aaron Jones, which makes me think that, it's slightly irrelevant for the offensive engine to keep running at the high engine, I guess it is, right? And then with Giovanni Bernard, I think that might be potentially bad chalk. And I would love to hear what Jason has to say about this. But, truly with Giovanni Bernard, we've seen him in these spots before. He used to be a starting running back, and his ceiling was always capped. And it's not like you're getting him at like this dirt cheap price tag. He's 4.5K on DraftKings. I think on a PPR site there, he's in play. On FanDuel, 4.8K. You kind of want to use them because the pricing is actually a little bit tighter over there this week. But with Jamal Williams being there, I go with the team that has a 30-point implied team total if he's starting today.
Yeah, I think that I would echo Jamal Williams as the guy here. Let's start with that. Jason, let's just get like relative level of confidence. All right. Let's start with Jamal Williams, assuming Aaron Jones is out, going down to Houston today.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the trick here, and I agree with everything Mitch said, but there's one big caveat, right? We don't know, and we may not know until the game gets underway what Aaron Jones's role will be, right? I mean, and as much as you never want to see injuries, I think a lot of us were hoping he didn't make the flight because it would have made the calculus for this much easier. But he did make the flight, which tells you they at least think there's a chance that he can go. On the other hand, as we know, they added another running back to the roster this week. So a lot of mixed signals from Green Bay with Aaron Jones and what they intend to do. I mean, I'm going to presume that the fact that they added another running back and that he has obviously been very much a giant, big question mark. I'm going to assume that he just doesn't get anywhere near a full workload this week, even if they do let him go. And it's really illogical. Like, why would they, if he is so injured that they're just not sure if he can go, why have him go, right? Because number one, as you guys have alluded, on paper, it's a fantastic matchup, arguably the best matchup in terms of strength of schedule this week for running backs. Two, we know that Jamal Williams, he's been playing well this year, even with Aaron Jones being an elite fantasy asset. So we know that Jamal can handle the load. And let's not forget A.J. Dillon. The rookie has effectively been a non-factor this year, but I don't think that is a condemnation of his long-term opportunity set there, particularly if they let Jones go for big money elsewhere. So yeah, like on the surface, it seems like Green Bay should just let Jones get healthy this week, play Williams and rotate Dillon in, and still have an effective offense. So I'm confused by the signals we're getting from them. But that said, I think that if we get word that Jones is out, then of course I completely agree. Jamal Williams should be chalk in DFS, and anyone that picked him up on waivers should have him in their lineup. But it's just, will we know in time? That's the question. I just want to touch quickly on the Giovanni Bernard situation. I guess I see it a little differently, and maybe it's because I think in redraft for most people, I feel like most of us play in PPR formats or half PPR, and Bernard has been a top 20 PPR fantasy back in almost every game he's ever been the primary ball carrier in Cincinnati. So in weeks where, Chubb, in weeks rather where Mixon hasn't played, or prior to Mixon when Bernard was given chances to be the feature back, he was quite effective from a fantasy perspective. So I'm not afraid at all to plug him in this week. We know Mixon is out, right? So I think if you're in a PPR format or even a half PPR, I think Bernard is justifiable in almost every situation as a running back too this week. So I'm a bit more optimistic than Mitch on him in PPR. I realize that in DFS he's, depending on which site you use, that may not be a factor, and certainly would then play into the math there.
In my novice DFS ways, I would say Gio is more of a cash play, a safe play, a high floor play, and Jamal Williams. I this is the good chalk. I like that. What's good chalk? Like the fruit flavored Tums. Those are okay. Let's
now, the
call
good chalk are those big giant ones that you can draw cool stuff on the street.
Oh yes,
in the suburbs. The bad chalk are the little ones where they ask you to go up and do the problem on the board in front of the whole class, and you didn't do your homework.
Right.
And you're trying to do it, and you're like pushing real hard, hoping it's magically going to pop in your head, and then it breaks.
Right. It gets all over your fingers.
Yeah.
And then I like it. I like Jamal Williams this week. I think the fact that we didn't talk about San Francisco is a good sign that chances are you don't want to play your San Francisco back. Whoever it is, there's stronger reasons to be worried than to be happy to have one. Although I do think that Hasty can assert himself in this one. And we'll see. I don't expect Aaron Jones to play. A.J. Dillon is kind of a what the heck flex. If Green Bay can open up a lead on Houston, then maybe Dillon becomes a good play. And you like playing players against Houston in general. But on the Houston side, Mitch, we're not going to see Jordan Akins, or at least it's very unlikely. He's questionable, but I think he hasn't practiced this week. I mean, Darren Fells has been the right answer at tight end 2 weeks in a row. Do you just not overthink this and put Darren Fells in? Have the prices adjusted on the sites to even make you pause?
That's great. That's great phrasing, because, the pricing should be really the deciding factor, right? I mean, if he's still cheap, you're putting him out there because he's on a team with a high implied team total of 27.5 points and a nice potential shootout against Green Bay. And he's on an offense that looks like it's been completely unchained with Bill O'Brien gone. So if Darren Fells, his price is down, is he still in play? The answer, Yes, his price is still down low enough where you can plug him in there. He can be included in large game stacks with Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers. I don't care which side. I like Fells, Brandon Cooks for some reason on both sites. Incredibly cheap, 5.2K on DraftKings this week. An absolute steal for a guy who's racked up 21 targets over the last 2 weeks, 17 receptions in those 21 targets. And I believe off the top of my head, I think it was 229 total yards. Don't hold me to that. I was around 229 total receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, the guy looks like what we kind of thought he could be if he was healthy this year in Houston. Did not look like this prior to Bill O'Brien. Looks like him and Watson are best friends now. Yeah. And Will Fuller still bringing in all sorts of red zone targets. This guy's scoring from all over the field, touchdown in 4 straight games. It is hard not to like this spot. It has to be one of the juicier looking spots I've seen in the past, probably 3-4 weeks this season. And I like all of the pieces. If Robert Tonyan plays today, it's Devontae Adams, Tonyan, Jamal Williams, Aaron Rodgers. You could probably even plug in Darren Fells on the other side as a very weak run back option. But truly, this is one of those games where I'm looking at 4 or 5 players. I'm just completely stacking it up. And if it doesn't hit that massive total, then so what? Okay, that lineup was dead. But if it does and everything comes to fruition how we envision it, then you are potentially putting yourself in a spot where you can roll in the money.
Yeah, not a lot of defense in this one, I don't think. Jason, it's 2 good weeks in a row post Bill O'Brien, enough for us to trust Brandon Cooks. Is he one of those players you don't even pause, you just automatically check until further notice?
It's like Pacino, right? Just as they pull me back in. I was the Brandon Cooks apologist, torchbearer this year, right? Wrote a detailed player spotlight about how he was the most undervalued player in ADP at any position. And then I've looked like an absolute imbecile for a month. And I thought, well, this is bad. And that wasn't in lieu of Will Fuller. It was just that I thought that just they could both be great. But yeah, I think to answer your question directly, Sig, absolutely. Listen, the Texans, regardless of their record and regardless of their construction as an entire team, there's no logical reason for that offense to have been as bad as it was at the start of the season. And we're seeing it now. I don't know. They might win 4 games this year because their defense is just horrific. But I think we're seeing now everything's back on track there. I think you have to like everybody. Frankly, even Randall Cobb was a what they had flex most weeks, right? I mean, there are going to be weeks where all 3 of those guys are viable. But yeah, I think Brandon Cooks is settled in. He's clearly building chemistry. And I think those 2 guys absolutely will be in most redraft lineups in most weeks.
Mitch, let's change gears to this New Orleans game. Carolina coming down to the Superdome. I think about 3,000 people there. Let's talk the New Orleans passing game. And these are those forks in the road when you're setting your lineup, when you're making waiver wire pickups, when you're making your DFS lineups, because no Manuel Sanders on the COVID list, no Michael Thomas, a hamstring, as that saga continues. So there are plays here. There's just the obvious, we'll play Alvin Kamara because he's going to get 30 touches and 3 touchdowns. There's play Latavius Murray because they're going to make this backfield the centerpiece of the offense. Marquez Callaway, I think, has to be dirt cheap. He had 4 for 34 with Emmanuel Sanders catching 12 balls the last time we saw this offense. And Callaway looked ready. He looked like one of those players who wasn't pausing or overwhelmed at all in his first NFL game. But there's also Traquan Smith, who's had a couple of good games. And there's Jared Cook. And there's also just none of the above. What's our smart Saints play in DFS today, Mitch?
All right, Sig. So I've tried to stay away from doing this at all through the first 7 weeks, but we had this tool on the site, and I'm only bringing this up because I have never seen numbers like this. Okay, we have this Top Stacks tool where it takes the market share of the projection, and they have the Saints trio of Breeze, Kamara, and Traquan Smith is the highest value 3-player team stack I've seen since we've had this tool on the site. And it's because of the pricing. I mean, Alvin Kamara in this role, even on a down week, had 76% of snaps last time we saw them out. And you got to think he's going to play 80% or so, even more potentially, as long as it's a close game. He's going to get peppered out of the backfield. He's going to get a bunch of carries. He's going to be the alpha and the omega of this offense. Traquan Smith down there at 4K, super cheap, should gobble up a bunch of targets. Doesn't matter if he is the primary focus of Carolina defense. I think that Traquan Smith is going to get peppered. And if you think that he's going to be held in check, then you nailed it. Sig. I think Callaway looked ready. I think he had 7 targets. That was with Emmanuel Sanders, hauling in 12 looks in that game at, I think, 32 passes by Breeze. There's potential here for Callaway his targets to go up, Traquan's to go up, Jared Cook to get 8 to 10 targets. And I think you could probably pencil in Kamara safely for another 8 to 10 targets. What this means for DFS is you have funneled focus to just a few players. And that is when opportunity, leads to lots of fantasy points, and at a spot where these guys are not priced up enough, in my opinion. I am so happy to pay, $4K for a volatile spot, a $4K player like Traquan Smith or a $3K player like Callaway, if I think they're going to be having 6 to 8 to 10 targets in this game. And you can run it back with players like Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. Mike Davis is underpriced on DraftKings, I think, specifically on a PPR site at 6.6K. I just love this spot. I think a lot of people potentially are not on this because they're worried about no Emmanuel Sanders, no Mike Thomas. Listen, at some point, you just have to look at the pricing. Drew Brees at 6.1K is kind of hard to fail, in my opinion. Even 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you're okay. And then, hoping that most of those go to Traquan Smith and Alvin Kamara, and you're okay. You're okay. That stack is going to be phenomenal still if that's where his 250 yards and 2 touchdowns goes. And then run it back on the other side with Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore, and you're a happy man by the end of the day.
Do you agree, Jason, just that this is a good game, a potentially fertile, rich game for fantasy production, a classic NFC South shootout?
Well, it's interesting because I think going into the season, we weren't sure what to make of Carolina's offense because it was a wholesale redo, but we all collectively thought that Carolina would have a horrendous defense, like just an absolute sieve for a defense, and that hasn't been the case. In fact, as you guys know, their pass defense has been near elite so far, and it's been shocking. I can't tell you I saw that coming, particularly because one of the reasons has been Rasul Douglas, who literally was the Eagles defense, which has struggled so mightily this year. Rasul was the odd man out. He was the one that we were sure had no place on the roster after adding a lot of new pieces. Now, Rasul is on the COVID list. Their kicker Sly's back off. He will kick this week, but Douglas will not play. He's on the COVID reserve list. And then I'm pretty sure both Jackson and Eli Apple, their other corners, are questionable, although likely to play. But it tells you that they're not 100% healthy. So on paper, at home, I agree with Mitch. Like, Breeze is who he is. He's a Hall of Famer. He's certainly been more than productive with lots of different rotating casts of characters. So I think it could be interesting. But I don't know, a shootout, that I'm not sure about. I also will say, too, the Saints defense, which I thought was going to be elite, has not been elite. So I do think Carolina will have no problem scoring this week. I agree with that. I think Traquan Smith is like a near must play because we saw what he's been doing in Michael Thomas's stead already. And, I think but I think what likely happens, frankly, if the script goes according to plan, is that Breeze dink and dunks this week, right? And we just, Kamara could have 8 to 10 targets, or if not more. I think Jared Cook is a must play in redrafts this week tight end's such a train wreck, right? This year, it's been an absolute disaster. You just plug and play unless you have a few of those top guys. So, I think both teams will move the ball fine this week. But I'm going to stop short of saying like an absolute shootout. I'm not sure we'll see that because I think there could be some fits and starts.
Yeah, the Saints secondary, I think, has given up 15 passing touchdowns. Well, it's not just on the secondary, but on the Saints defense. Teddy coming in struggling after that game against Chicago last week. Saints coming in off a bye, and again, a good game for the Panthers. Kind of a yardstick game to see where they stand. Just a couple more minutes here with Mitch, so let's touch on some games real quick. Washington, Dallas. Woodrow's Eagles and the Giants showed us that bad NFC East football can be good fantasy production, at least for the quarterbacks. Are we liking this game, or is it a trap?
I don't know how much I like this game in total as far as like stacks go or large game stacks with Dalton, things like that. But there are a few pieces I really like in this game. And one of them is Terry McLaurin. I mean, he is 5.8K on DraftKings. This Dallas secondary is awful. They're giving up 32 points per game to opposing wide receivers. I think McLaurin's just too cheap. He's too cheap across the industry. FanDuel, 7.1K. He's kind of priced around some of the other second tier tier type wide receivers like DK Metcalf, I think that keeps his ownership at like 5% or so on FanDuel, which makes him a nice sneaky pivot, especially if people are focusing on some of those higher probability of hitting their potential type plays. I think McLaurin slides in there as somebody who could sneak in there, go 8 for 100 and a score, 8 for 102 scores against Dallas. I mean, we are watching anybody and everybody throwing them and wide receivers. And here's the thing, it's not like the defense just has like poor talent all over the field. They look like they just have no cohesion. I mean, how often do we see these Dallas Cowboys games and there's guys wide open all over the field? It's not like they're just getting beaten, one-on-one coverage. It's just like breakdown after breakdown. And can Washington take care of it for 4 full quarters as an offense? I don't think so. But I think Terry McLaurin can. And he only needs a couple plays here and there where, Dallas just can't communicate and he's open by, 5-6 yards on the route and he's gone. He's gone. He's fast enough. He's quick enough. He's got the hands, the moves. And I love him this week. He's my top value wide receiver on DraftKings at 5.8K.
Mitch, at quarterback, do you anticipate people will be going away from Josh Allen because of his last 2 games? And does that mean it's time to get in? Or what's the Josh Allen outlook in a matchup against the Jets that should be an easy one?
Yeah, I know. Josh Allen's ownership projection right now at 5.43%, single digit ownership, and that's not even inside like the top 6 or 7 owned quarterbacks on the main slate. Phenomenal spot. And I think the thing is here, even if you think, all right, Bills are up 28-0, they're not chucking the ball anymore, you could probably still play Josh Allen and just run him out there as a naked quarterback. And I don't mean like, a new Josh Allen. You're just not going with it. You're not going with a wide receiver stack. You don't need Diggs or someone like that in there. Just plug in Josh Allen, let him use his legs, hopefully get a red zone rushing touchdown, throw 2 touchdowns, and you're sitting pretty. The thing is here, if you do something like that, you're probably using him for cash games at best. If you're doing that, you're giving up the opportunity of plugging in Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams and running it back with Brandon Cooks. I think the opportunity cost of plugging in Josh Allen this week is way too great. You're giving up way too much opportunity by using Josh Allen without a potential stack there. You can't run back at Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs with Jamison Crowder. There's nothing like that in this game. So I think you're giving up too much opportunity by using Josh Allen in tournaments. I think you can use him in cash games just to make that abundantly clear, but in tournaments, too much opportunity lost there by plugging him in and not the other guys.
All right, a few quick hitters, lightning round before I send you off to your loving audience. Favorite single player from Seattle, Arizona?
Favorite single player, Seattle, Arizona's got to be DK Metcalf. I think
Yes.
I think this guy has an opportunity for a couple touchdowns today. Arizona's defense has not been horrible the last 2 weeks. I think they've only given up 20 points. Seattle, on the other side, has given up 38 points. 38.4 points per game to opposing wide receivers. And DeAndre Hopkins potentially, labored by his ankle. I'm not too worried. I think this is just the stud treatment for a star. And, if that means that people are off DeAndre Hopkins because they're worried about him, I'm running DK Metcalf with DeAndre Hopkins in same lineups for a little opposing wide receiver correlation.
You don't have to worry if you check out Rise or Fall, DFS Donuts, Mitch Carl, all of your DFS needs, and Sunday morning brushing up on your DFS lineups with Mitch. Thanks always for your time.
Too kind. And best of luck, everybody. I hope somebody wins some serious money. Football Guys members, you guys are in the best hands in the industry. Good luck.
All right. Well, Jason, before we jump back into the immediate things, I want to get your thoughts on Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, the Buck. Is there something there? Yeah. I mean, what's the fallout? Just give us your hot Antonio Brown, the Buck takes.
Well, my first when I saw where you're signing, it was an expletive laden tirade. Because listen, it's been a struggle this year for all of us, right? If you're in a lot of leagues, there's no way, I'm in over 30 leagues. There's no way all of your leagues are going according to script this year. It's just not happening. Never does, but this year in particular. So I have teams that are rolling, sure, but I have teams that I look at my lineup each week and I'm playing the healthy people, right? I'm playing the people that I can, not because I don't have the luxury of playing matchups. So preemptive pickups, right? You're always harping on it on the waiver wire show. I think it's a must listen every week. And I was fortunate enough to acquire Antonio Brown over the course of the last few weeks in 16 of my leagues. So I thought, bonanza, I'm hitting the lottery here if he signs with the right team. Now, admittedly, Seattle was the favorite, and he would have been in maybe only a little bit better situation there because they also have very viable, talented starting wide receivers. But Tampa Bay, man, it's like, listen, the thing about it is if it works out for him, and I'm not saying it won't, it's going to be problematic for either Evans or Godwin or both, right? I mean, Tampa Bay is not going to throw it 50 times a game. Or should they? So I think it's great news for Tom Brady, right? It's great news for the Bucs as a team, right? I mean, absolutely. Both Godwin and Evans have been injured already this year, so from a depth perspective, it's great. We got a 1 week glimpse of Brady and Brown in New England, and it was magical, right? We all thought, oh my God, this is going to be Randy Moss, 2.0. It's instant connection, and I think we forget, Sig, because of the drama with Antonio Brown this last 18 months, just how elite he is. I mean, he is a plug and play top 5 talent in the NFL at the position, presuming he's healthy, which I assume he is. So, man, I don't know. I'm curious to see how it goes. I worry that it's going to be just not dissimilar to Dallas when Dak was there. You're going to, one of them's going to be a disappointment each week. The other two are probably going to be productive enough, and they're all going to have huge weeks. And so, from a predictability, a volatility standpoint, yeah, I don't think I think it's problematic for everybody other than Brady. But, that said, again, this is a league full of injuries. So if Evans or if Godwin get hurt and are out for multiple weeks, then I think you're set, right? I think the offense still hums, and the other two that are healthy are going to be, highly productive and must start. So, again, it probably works out better than I'm feeling it will now, because the chances of all three being healthy in the lineup every week are probably pretty low. But while all three are healthy in the lineup, it's a frustration. I really had hoped that AB had landed with a team that was a contender that just had a clear-cut need at the starting spot. And there were plenty of spots there are plenty of teams that could have been the case, and it just didn't work out that way. So what do you feel about it? I haven't listened to the Audible yet this week. So,
well, look, I think that you and I probably are seeing eye to eye on one big point, which is, and when I was asked about this earlier this week, I see Tampa as a defense and running game team at this point. Yeah. And they did have the one game with 5 passing touchdowns against the Chargers because the Chargers jumped out to a 24-7 lead because Justin Herbert is awesome. But otherwise, and even against Tampa, when Brady had 3 passing touchdowns, they ran away from Denver. And I think that you're just not looking at this as more than a 30 or 35 pass attempt offense, and the math doesn't work. Even with hyper accuracy, hyper efficiency, which we haven't exactly gotten from Brady, the math just doesn't work. And that doesn't include potential for Rob Gronkowski and other guys getting mixed in. So you're right. Volatility, predictability wise, it's bad. And I suppose one scenario here is, because this is clearly a Brady move, that Brady just zeroes in on Brown and it doesn't matter, and they're paying Evans and Godwin going into soon a new contract are unhappy because they're not getting. I mean, there is a dynamic, whether we like it or not, that the quarterbacks, with the exception of guys like Jared Goff or Jimmy Garoppolo, like the extension of the offensive coordinator and head coach type quarterbacks, they do kind of steer the offense. And in so much that Brady can do that. And so I didn't actually pick up Antonio Brown. It's a great move to stash him and see what happens. But I'm really much more interested in this from the NFL reality show standpoint, because Bruce Arians said there's not room for Antonio Brown. And Bruce Arians has coached Antonio Brown back when they were both with Pittsburgh. And Arians was not equivocating when he talked about Antonio Brown. And now I think that you hit on the key point, though, with Evans being banged up and Godwin being banged up. Arians got to see that maybe this is not going to work if we're relying on Scott Miller. We need this, and that's why he relented. But I still think it's possible that Antonio Brown, this term is thrown around way too much, Woodrow, but that he really is a cancer. That he really is like a free radical, like someone that when you, especially in COVID times where you're really counting on each other, and I just don't know how stable he is as an individual.
So I never get on Twitter, like not wars or flame wars or back and forth. It never happened. But I replied to Dan Graziano, ESPN's Dan Graziano had tweeted about basically taking a shot at AB and saying, how did it work out in New England? I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the Twitter open, but he had tweeted and it went viral. That's probably why I saw it. Implying like, hey, how did it work out in New England? And and then I just replied, I didn't like at reply him. I replied to like my followers, which I didn't realize he followed me. And I said, it worked out pretty well for the week that before, like on the field, it worked. It was incredible. It made Brady look like an MVP again, and it made Brown look like the All-Pro that he always has been. And then Dan replied to me. He quote tweeted me and said, "Yeah, but for how many games?" And I said, "1, obviously." And he said, "That's my point." And is there a potential here where Brown is, like you said, a cancer or has still got some kind of mental issues or what have you, and it just doesn't work out? Absolutely. But fantasy as a game is all about opportunity cost, right? Yeah, so Brown was free. I mean, Brown was effectively free on all but leagues this week where you maybe had a Friday or Saturday waiver and he still was available. Then you probably had to pay a fair price for him, but he was basically free. And so I think most of us in the position where if in the next 2 weeks he does nothing or there's kind of strange commentary or bad mojo, you just cut him. I mean, it's no different than teams that picked up Josh Gordon, who, by the way, is still on the Seahawks this preseason for the 18th time, hoping it would work out. I think the difference is that Brown's fall from grace was so baffling, but it didn't coincide with inconsistency or lack of ability to play on the field, right? Whereas Gordon's 7-8 reduxes here now also came with a lot of inconsistent play. So I don't know, man. Like, I'm with you. I guess the question I'd ask you, and maybe you touched on it on the Thursday show, like I said, I haven't listened yet, is if you are a fantasy manager who has Evans or Godwin, are you doing anything? Are you trying to proactively trade them now? Or are you saying no, it'll all work out for them? Those are still two pieces that I want for my playoff run.
Oh, the problem is that I think that if you want to sell Evans or Godwin, if you think the bottom is really dropping out for them, and it's possible, I think some people got that feeling about Evans last week anyway. Mm-hmm. Godwin at least had some profile as a high floor PPR play, like going to give you 10 or 12 points no matter what. So maybe Evans is the guy that if you're really worried that you get out now, but you still have the game against Vegas today. You still have the game against the Giants. I don't think Brown's going to play until the game against the Saints. Isn't that fantastic, by the way? Isn't that just I think it was the highest rated 1 or 4 o'clock Eastern game so far this year, the week 1, the Saints and the Bucks, because again, for me, it's the reality show. So anyway, to answer your question before I go on about this for a little bit more, and then we'll get back to week 7. I think the answer is probably the best angle is if you're worried, then you hope for Evans or Godwin to have big games today, or maybe today and next week against the Giants. And it's a Monday night game, I believe. So then you maybe try to sell high on that momentum. But I feel like everybody is factoring in exactly what you're factoring in, Jason, thinking like, are you going to trust starting either of these guys when Brown is here? I'm not sure what you're going to get for them. But, again, maybe this is just the bitter Steelers fan in me, Woodrow. But from a narrative standpoint, there really is, Tampa Bay is not New England. This was not Tom Brady's locker room. And there was even whispers, that after the loss to Chicago, when Brady stomped around and, raised Cain, we can't play this, that the locker room was like, what's up with this guy, I mean, because it's not his team, it's not his locker room. Mm-hmm. And then what does this move do to the locker room? I mean, it's like when your sister says, my boyfriend is going to start staying with us for a little while, and you're like, well, I don't know about that guy. I don't trust that guy. So, Brady vouched for him. And I just think locker rooms are fragile places. And if Antonio Brown did not really show up ready to be a professional, which at the end of the run with the Steelers, he absolutely was not a professional. And that was part of the reason everything started falling apart. Mm-hmm. then you have an interesting thing for maybe Bruce Arians' toughest head coaching job, to kind of, because the team, they have the pieces to make a Super Bowl run without Brown. Brown.
Imagine the conversations that Arians and the front office had to have with Godwin and Evans, right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm sure they put on a good face and said, hey, whatever it takes to win, we're about a Super Bowl. But yeah, I mean, like you said, this isn't adding even like Des Bryant or Terrell Owens, right? Where it's understood that they may have a little left in the tank and they're the third option. It's just depth, right? This is a guy who I'm presuming is still talent-wise better than either of them, right? Like in terms of if he's focused, and this big F, but if he's shows up to practice and he understands the playbook because it's partially Tom's playbook, he's going to be better than them both, like on the practice field. And they're going to be like, okay. Yeah. So do you believe in me? Do you not? But anyway, it is what it is. Like you said, it's going to be fascinating to watch whether or not it's I mean, I kind of avoided Godwin in drafts, not because I don't think he's great, but because there was this narrative that he was going to be the clear number one over Evans and that he would be like the Edelman, Wes Welker, even on steroids because he's a much better athlete. And he was going around earlier than I was comfortable taking him. But I do have a lot of Evans shares. And admittedly, his injuries have played a part but he's been up and down. But it's tough because I've always thought that Evans was a bit underrated as an NFL talent. But I also think, if I'm being objective, Antonio Brown's better than Evans at almost everything. Sure. Like if we were doing the Matt Waldman deep breakdown of all the different skills that go into being a wide receiver, I think a healthy Antonio Brown is slightly too demonstrably better at every trait than Evans.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's at least the last we saw of Antonio Brown. Let's talk real quick about his former Steelers teammate, Le'Veon Bell. It probably is a little too much to put Bell in this week, but there's a lot here. I mean, I guess really we can divide this up into three choices or four, but I think the fourth isn't attractive. What's going to be the best position in the Kansas City backfield? Edwards-Helaire, Bell, both, or neither?
Yeah, and I'll have to be consistent here because we talked about this last week, and I very much was like all in on the Bell train, and I still think, it's ironic, much like with Antonio Brown, we're kind of playing armchair psychiatrist here. Like I'm presuming that Bell hasn't. What we've seen of Bell in New York was as much about lack of happiness and focus than it was degradation of talent. And if I'm right about that, then I still think that Le'Veon Bell is a Hall of Fame caliber talent, and he likely pushes Edwards-Helaire to the side. But since we talked last week, Edwards-Helaire put on a show, and Reed has come out and said, we signed Bell to be the backup. Now, I actually charted in the preseason Reed's coaching history because there was a lot of debate about whether he was a fan of feature backs or not. And I very firmly believe he is absolutely, unequivocally a fan of feature backs when he feels like he has one. So that is the question. I'm going to presume that right now, because of what we saw of Edwards-Helaire this past game, that he will get the chance to keep the primary job, but it is going to be an extremely short leash. So for now, I'd rather have Edwards-Helaire. If you're asking me if I had the choice of which one to have in my roster for the rest of the year, I would lean Edwards-Helaire, but I do suspect that it will be maddening, especially come the fantasy playoff weeks. I think both will have roles.
I'd still say both. I like both. And I think the other ingredient here is that, like we saw on the Monday afternoon game, teams are smartly, and this is almost taking a page out of Belichick's book, any play where Patrick Mahomes doesn't throw downfield is a win for the defense, right? You just don't want him throwing downfield. You don't want him getting outside the pocket. You don't want him making those plays. So you play a soft defense, a light box, and you take that away and you take your chances and hope you can have an individual play get you off the field on third down or have a bounce go your way. And that tells me there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Edwards-Helaire and Bell in this offense, and probably Travis Kelce too. So we'll see. It's fascinating though that the Bell Brown storylines converging mid 2020 makes a lot of sense.
Now, this would be the snow, by the way. So I mean, that's a whole different thing. Like
right today. I mean, and today it could be absolutely an Edwards-Helaire and Bell kind of day, and a Kansas City defense even day, and that's another reason to like Kansas City defense going forward too. All right, let's circle back to the Steelers. Pittsburgh, Tennessee. I don't have the stats in front of me. We need Chase here. I need Chase up in the corner to say that would be, 2007 would be the last time. I don't know the last time there's been a battle of the undefeateds in week 7. That's pretty rare.
Mhm.
And I think both of these teams earn it. I don't think that this is a situation like, we'll say, the Bears, where you look at the record and you say the record doesn't really match the team. The record matches the team. From fantasy, do you think this is a game that catches fire because you have good quarterback play, because you have teams that can execute pretty well on offense? Do you think this turns into a defensive battle? Is there anybody standing out? There's so many layers to pick through here. The Steelers lose Devin Bush. Tennessee loses Taylor Lewan. Tennessee, the thing about Tennessee is every challenge, Ryan Tannehill rises to the occasion too. So lots in this marquee game.
Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, well, first let's start, I think, with the easier part of it, which is that James Conner should ball out this week, right? The Tennessee run defense has been bad, and they seem, I think, again, against script of what we thought of the Titans a year ago, or at least this time a year ago. They're more than happy to win a shootout because they're showing they can win. They can. The impressive thing about the Titans, Sig, is that they can win games in any way. And I hadn't given much thought to Mike Vrabel as a head coach, even until late last year when he made that run. But I think he's proving this year he as a leader of men and someone that can get his team focused. He's right up there, right? And then Titans fans, enjoy it while you can, because Art Smith is going to be an NFL head coach next year.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is your halcyon times. It's now or never for you guys, I think, this year. Because Art Smith is like way better and innovative as a play caller than I thought he would be when they basically promoted him in-house after LaFleur left after one season. Okay, but to your point, I think James Conner must play, should ball out. Now, as you noted, the Steelers defense is very good, but they lost Devin Bush, and it's like, can you ever sit Derrick Henry? Like, can you ever worry about Derrick Henry? I mean, is there a more potent power back in the league, period? Full stop. I mean, he's certainly played better, and part of it is a supporting cast than Zeke this year, right? I mean, McCaffrey's been hurt. So I feel like you feel good about anyone on both ground games. You feel good, regardless of the Steelers being a very good defense. I think you always feel good with Henry, because they'll stay committed to that ground game too. In terms of the passing attacks, it's tricky because, as you also noted, Tannehill's been amazing, and he's done it even when his theoretical stars like A.J. Brown haven't been in the lineup. Jonnu Smith's cleared. He's off the injury report. They have a full cast of characters. I guess I'm put it this way. I'm more than comfortable having all of those guys on both sides in my lineups this week. I think I got a few start-sit questions with Tannehill because of the matchup. Mm-hmm. And most of them I found saying start, like based on people were asking me, like, Tannehill or Goff, Tannehill or so there aren't many quarterbacks I'd be telling you, oh, definitely sit Tannehill because of the matchup. It's just, I think they are all must starts until proven otherwise.
Yeah, this is going to be, you mentioned Arthur Smith, and it's a name that we should mention more, because anytime we talk about Derrick Henry or Ryan Tannehill, we should mention Arthur Smith, because it's not just Ryan Tannehill executing, it's him executing the play that's dialed up at just the right moment. Mm-hmm. And Arthur Smith was unheralded, an internal promotion. The idea of it's kind of giving Marcus Mariota some continuity. I think he was the tight end coach, and he meshes well with Vrabel. And yeah, Vrabel, a low key genius with his move against Houston last week. If folks didn't see it, taking a 12 men on the field penalty, even while the players saying, "Really, coach?" What and he's like, "Just go out there." And they take that penalty, taking a page from Belichick's book, which he did to Belichick in the playoffs last year. So it's just delicious to see this stuff come full circle. Should be a delicious game. A real test for Arthur Smith. And what I wonder, Jason, you're not benching Derrick Henry, although 75% of Henry's carries are going to go for like 1 yard or less in this game. But the other 25% may make his whole week, or this also is a game maybe where Henry is used more as a receiver. And Bush, the biggest vulnerability for the Steelers going forward without Bush is his ability to defend sideline to sideline against pass-catching running backs. So not really a big problem today. They don't have that type of running back. Darrington Evans is on IR. And the other thing to watch here is the loss of Taylor Lewan, because the Steelers especially have the personnel to exploit that. But again, Arthur Smith has had the plays dialed up. Real quick on the play caller front, San Francisco and New England looks like just a terrible game. I mean, maybe an entertaining game in some ways, but a terrible game for fantasy. But you have challenges for two guys that we would laud as offensive geniuses. One is Josh McDaniels. Can you even get the dang engine to turn over in this offense right now after what they did against the Broncos? The other is Jimmy Garoppolo, who, numbers aside, is not a passing downfield well. And this is a New England defense that should probably take him out of his comfort zone, which I would say takes away George Kittle and otherwise compresses things towards the line of scrimmage. Do you see this being anything but a battle of field goals? Do you think there's a secret star somewhere in here?
Well, first of all, this is why we love the NFL, right? This is why we have spent so much of our personal and professional lives focusing on this crazy sport, right? Because every week changes the narrative. Like, we have completely different stories to tell and completely different convictions and failed convictions based on what we see each week, right? Incrementally. I recall the Twitter was aflame after the first 2 weeks with New England about sign Cam. They got the quarterback of the next 5 years. Give him a contract while you can. And it's like, well, why would you need to extend him after 2 weeks? But now he's thrown 100 for 180 yards or less, right? For 4 straight games, something like that. And they've looked terrible. I mean, they've looked as bad as I think a lot of us thought they might, based on a very uninspired preseason. From the beat, it seemed like they didn't. It seemed like in the preseason, it wasn't clear New England had a quarterback, right?
Right.
Then we thought, oh, that was just shenanigans. Cam's back; he's healthy. I don't know what's going on because, again, preseason it was like, well, who do they have to throw to? What's the offensive line look like? And so I'm with you. I think I'd be surprised if this is some kind of offensive explosion or a get-right game for either side. I do think Kyle Shanahan is an extremely talented, not just play caller, but architect of an offense. I think he has shown time and time again that he will take the pieces he has and he will course correct. So I guess I have more faith that San Francisco can round into offensive form in the next few weeks than I do New England, ironically. But this week, in terms of who to like, all this being said, I wouldn't be shocked if Cam had a decent week. I mean, in the sense that San Francisco, we still view them as this vaunted defense, but let's not forget they lost, their 2 best edge rushers and edge defenders to ACL tears in the same game. And I think we're starting to see chinks in the armor there. But I don't think there's any deep sleepers. I would say, and because I know Mitch touched on it at the start of the show, I'm actually fairly okay with Jerick McKinnon this week in PPR formats. I know Wilson is healthy as well and Hasty is active, but I think when McKinnon is healthy, we know Shanahan likes him. He brought him over to be the feature back before his other injuries that set him back almost 2 years. So I'm okay with McKinnon. I think if there's a surprise this week, it's McKinnon.
My only worry about McKinnon, and I say only, like to downplay it, I'm not, it's just that Shanahan went away from him last week.
It's true.
And he didn't look, and this is why sometimes we should be careful. And I'm speaking to myself because McKinnon finally did get that 90+% snap count because he's better than Jeff Wilson. Come on. And then he hasn't looked quite the same since then. And I think that Shanahan recognized that, went to Hasty. Hasty with those fresh legs looked good, helped him close out the game. And now Wilson is back, and then Tevin Coleman's going to be back in a week or two to mess this up even more. And we'll see. But for New England, this is a back against the wall kind of game for New England, even though it's only week 7. They got Buffalo next week, and it could start to get away from them pretty quickly. I'm very fascinated, Woodrow, with the Raiders offense. I feel like we haven't given nearly enough pub to what the Raiders offense looks like going into the bye. And the elements that John Gruden has collected around Derek Carr to finally make Derek Carr look like Derek Carr did like 4 years ago when we were all really excited about him. But he faces Tampa Bay this week. This is a great matchup. I always like to pause anytime there's a Super Bowl matchup to a Super Bowl rematch because we only get those every 4 years. And for John Gruden to be on the other side of this matchup, and the Raiders are in Vegas, and who would have thunk it? Let's go back to that Super Bowl and say these two teams will meet again in about 20 years. Seriously. And Gruden will coach the Raiders again, and they'll be the Las Vegas Raiders. We never would have called it. Do you think that this is a game where we are coming out of it talking about the Bucs defense and saying the Bucs defense is one of the strongest forces in the NFL this year, along with like Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes and so on? Or do you think this is a game that we come out like we did in that Raiders game, Chiefs game, and say, put some respect on the Raiders? This is a team that we might have to start talking about as a contender to not just make the playoffs, but win in the playoffs.
That's a great question. I'm with you that I think that the Raiders are a much better, well-rounded offensive unit than many expected going into the season. Derek Carr was, when we were doing our first rankings and projections, Sig, in late April, early May, I mean, Carr was 28th, 29th for me. I just pretty much discounted him and thought he was the Achilles heel of this Raiders unit. And then other people that I value said, well, I mean, I'm not saying he's a top 10 guy, but take a look. And, you almost forget that he completed over 70% of his passes last year. Now, admittedly, there was a very safe script in many cases, but I'm like, wow, can I really put a guy that's just completed 70% of his passes in the bottom 5 in the league? Like, especially given the additions at the receiver position that we were seeing in terms of Ruggs and Edwards and the like, and bolstering of the depth beyond, behind key players like with Waller, with Witten and Moreau. And so I'm like, I don't know, So I did fortunately end up putting Carr in that kind of low end QB2 range by the time most drafts were happening. And I'm happy about that. I'm with you. I'm not sure. I guess my one reticence about making a definitive statement about which way it's going to go this week is that I know that the Raiders passed all their COVID tests.
Yep.
But my understanding, though, is that's exclusive of Trent Brown, though, right? Like, he's out. Am I right about that?
I knew he was getting healthier.
Okay.
Let me see real quick.
I thought he was, because I thought he had COVID, and that's why the others were put in the protocol.
And that's why the others were put in as close contacts. And that's, by the way, just as a real quick note, the close, because we saw the same thing with the Bills tight ends. No big deal. Well, actually, Tyler Kroft is there for a desperation play if you want him. You're right. Trent Brown and Jonathan Abram are the two that will miss the game because of coronavirus.
Yeah, so they'll be without Trent Brown. So I think Tampa Bay's defense is legit. I think that they will give them fits and starts. Sometimes I think Gruden and his crew get a little too cute, like with what they want to do. I think the identity of this team can and should be Jacobs.
Right.
And while that's not great for Jacobs' long-term health because he's going to Cadillac Williams him, I think the Raiders are at their best when the game script and their focus allow them to give Jacobs 25 touches, right? So I think the Raiders are a very viable team. I think they're a fringe playoff team. But I think in a matchup I think the Buccaneers defense is closer to elite and thus able to win where I think the Raiders are. I think the Raiders are a good offense. I think the Bucs are a very good to great defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And there's still some vulnerabilities. What's going to be really fascinating about this matchup is, in so much as we've seen vulnerabilities, I referred to that Chargers game against the Bucs that Herbert had them up 24-7. It was the deep ball. It was Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson reeling in deep balls against the Bucs secondary, which is coming around. They've got some pieces finally. Antoine Winfield Jr. Doesn't that make you feel old, Woodrow? Carlton Davis. But Carlton Davis doesn't strike me as the type that's going to match up well against a Henry Ruggs. He's a guy that has more length and has more physicality in his game. I'm just fascinated in this one because you have all these elements. You mentioned it is a Jacobs offense, as it should be, but against the Bucs, why are you going and taking the bull by the horns? You've got Darren Waller, you've got Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar. There's a blast from the past for you, right? He's playing. He's making plays.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's absolutely adding something to this offense. And they got Hunter Renfrow. So this is going to be a fun game. And although it got shifted from Seattle, Arizona on the marquee Sunday night is nice. But it's Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson. I hope we get to see that matchup like 20 times or 25 times.
Oh, definitely. And one thing I think that as I'm thinking about the way this conversation's gone this hour, there aren't a lot of declarative, definitive statements from any of us, and I think you see that in the lineups, in the spreads this week, right? I mean, more than half the games are a kick, field goal or less in terms of the spread, right? And there's only one double-digit spread, and that's Buffalo at the Jets, So
right. And then next week,
and that's a 10.
Next week it's
right?
next week's the Chiefs giving 21.5 to the Jets. I think.
Yeah. But I guess my point being is like the odds makers who have the best handle of the probability tree of outcomes are telling you like this is a week where a lot of very evenly matched teams are going up against one another, and it's really going to come down to those injuries, freak plays. We're far enough farther along where I think a lot of these units are what we think they are. So it's going to be fascinating to see who can start separating themselves, right? But
absolutely,
it
is. Well, and they are who we think they are. And I mentioned this, and I'll talk about it more next week and spend some more time on it. But now we can look at the schedule and really have an idea which schedules are set up to help teams take off and which schedules have a lot of stumbling blocks, because we know who these offenses are, who these defenses are, strengths and weaknesses, and so on. However, another thing, and I think what keeps us coming back, I mean, and like every other year of fantasy football, if you're listening to this show, you've been playing fantasy football for a while, you like fantasy football, it still rewards perseverance. It's just like the NFL. It rewards perseverance. It rewards, still staying focused on your goal, even whenever there's all kinds of trip, minefield, stumbling block, whatever metaphor you want to use. It's the people who are sticking with it are being rewarded. But what makes I think so compelling always, Woodrow, is week to week we're always surprised. There's always a few things that surprise us, and it is because the nature and complexion of these defenses and offenses and the way that these coaches go about the mental side of their job brings out different things in different teams. I mean, one opponent, look at Green Bay. I mean, they were cruising, and then they face a punch you in the face team, and they shrink into the fetal position. Houston's not going to punch them in the face, so they probably won't shrink into the fetal position today, but it makes you start to look ahead of the schedule. And you're learning that different opponents bring out different things in teams, positive and negative. And that's something I think that we can do a lot better job in fantasy football, especially for DFS, because it's just that 1 week window of trying to forecast, because it's about the range of outcomes, and it's not just saying, well, every week every player and team is going to be exactly in the middle of the range of outcomes. It's about figuring out, just like we do for our draft rankings, well, which side, the positive and negative, do we feel is more likely? And it's enjoyable. It's always enjoyable. It's enjoyable to have everyone here. It's flattering and sometimes a little bit intimidating, because we have hundreds here on Sundays, and you all do a fantastic job in the chat room, and we do our best to answer questions. I have got my opiner up, by the way, if you all want to get any last second questions in, check that out. Dr. Gene will be back with us next week. We've got Thursday Night Football. I believe this week is Atlanta and Carolina, so we'll be back with you for that. Woodrow and Mitch Carl will be back with us Sunday morning. Everybody out there, enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy and cherish every Sunday we get together. As always, we like spending it with you because you're so